What's up, guys? Come on in. It is the Money-nista, Natasha Varela, 20 years in audit, accounting, and tax, real estate investor, business owner, 13 years in a large business and international division of the Internal Revenue Service. And I want to talk to everyone about the Biden administration blueprint for a renter's bill of rights. So I have my notes here. So I just want to kind of bridge the gap between, tenant and landlord education. So we are in a space right now where, one of the largest populations, which are the baby boomers, they are retiring. Okay. And to supplement retirement, they're selling their homes. Okay. A lot of the times they're multifamilies, they're single families, whatever have you. And we have a boom of investors coming in, right? Small and large. And so what's happening is, and I can speak from experience, I'm not only a landlord of several properties, I'm also a tenant, right? I don't own where I live yet, soon. So particularly in a lot of cases, people like myself are investing in properties that were owned by people who are retiring. They're older, they're likely in their anywhere from their late 60s to their 80s, and they're not passing the property down. They're cashing out to supplement their retirement. Now, a lot of these properties are really, really, really old, okay, and they've owned the property forever and they don't have a mortgage, right? So the carrying costs are likely just utilities, property taxes, and whatever maintenance and repairs. And a lot of times, these houses are very, very old. So a lot of my properties are in New England. And a lot of them were built in, 1906 or 7 or, early 1900s. And so one of the things I have to account for when I purchase property is updating the plumbing, updating the electrical, updating the appliances, updating the paint, taking down wallpaper, pulling up carpets that's been there forever, things of that nature, right? And that is a cost to the new owner, okay? The people selling who are older, which is majority of the time, they're not going to do all of that, right? They just want to take their money and go. And so what usually happens is if you do purchase property, particularly a rental multifamily where you have tenants in there, 9 out of 10 times those tenants aren't paying market rate. They've been in there forever. The landlord doesn't really, or the previous owner, should I say, doesn't really care to increase it because they don't have any carrying costs, right? Good paying tenants. They've been paying that rent forever. Could be, I purchased a property in September of 2021, and the rents were so low because the owner, who was older, had owned the property 37 years. Okay. And the rent was almost nil. All right. So what happens is they sell the property to take their money, rightfully so, because they needed to supplement their retirement. And the new owner has a carrying cost because they have a mortgage. Okay. And so now the new owner has to take on tenants that are paying well below market rate and kind of think of a way to increase the rent so that they can cover their mortgage, right? Their carrying costs. This is just what happens. This is the cycle of business. And this is why I want to educate you guys on what happens, right? So nobody ever talks about the good landlords. You hear slumlords. No one ever talks about the great tenants. You always hear about crappy tenants, right? I have great tenants. They pay on time. I had one eviction, okay, and it was for a tenant I inherited. And again, I had to account for my carrying costs, whereas before they didn't have to pay market rate because the previous owner had no carrying costs, right? And so that's one of the hurdles that you're going to have a lot of new investors come in and deal with, right? People who've been in the property forever, they are used to the old owner, they're used to, things being the way they were. And here you are with repairs that have to be done. And one of the reasons why the old owner is unloading is because they don't want to deal with the repairs. They just want to go, and that's fine. But to the tenants out there, this is what happens, right? The new owner has a carrying cost. Okay. Most people cannot afford to pay cash. So you're either going to have a small mom and pop landlord or you're going to have a large corporation landlord. You're going to have a landlord, right? If you can't afford to purchase, you're going to have a landlord. And, as an ethical landlord, I think it's important as investors, as landlords, when we take on inherited tenants, that we kind of educate the tenants. Now, I always send my tenants a letter. I let them know, I introduce myself as a landlord and, I know what their rent is and I'm going to honor their lease. A lot of the times they're on month to month because it was so informal. They've been there forever. And I usually give them a good 6 months. Okay. And that's part of being an ethical landlord and being, a savvy investor. When you close on your property, a lot of times the lender wants to make sure you have 6 months of reserves. And you should. You should have 6 months of reserves. And to supplement, you don't want to just acquire property and throw people to the side, right? They're still people. And so what I did, in the case of inheriting tenants with two properties I purchased, is I had a conversation with them, and I sent them an official letter introducing myself, saying, this is what's going to happen. This is your current rent. This is the market rate for your unit. Okay. And this is why you're getting a rent increase. Unfortunately, your new landlord has carrying costs, right? And they have to cover the cost of the property. Otherwise, you're asking your landlord to pay for you to live, which we all know that's not going to happen. So a lot of times, if you explain yourself to your tenants, and open up the lines of communication, things will go smoothly. Okay. I've only had one official eviction with an inherited tenant, and I gave ample amount of time so that I could cover my bases. And so the second thing I want to mention is I require all my tenants to have lease protection insurance. So I know this big thing is going around about application fees being collected and you're not getting your apartments. And that's crappy when people do that. I don't charge an application fee. The application is free. Once you're approved through my lease protection insurance agency, you pay the fee. And the fee is likely inclusive of the security deposit. So when you're moving in, you're just giving me your first month's rent. Okay, so it's cheaper for you to move in. I'm protected for the lease, right? And I'm likely to attract quality tenants who are responsible, knowing that they're accountable to an insurance company should they default on payment, right? And to learn more, you can go ahead and I'll put the link for my mastermind, my tax strategies mastermind, which includes landlord protection resources in the description box. So that's one of the things I wanted to do to kind of bridge the gap so that tenants don't see landlords as these greedy money grabbers. No, we have carrying costs, and likely for all the properties, particularly now where the younger generation is snatching up the properties, they require a lot of work. Okay, nobody wants to move into a property that's dilapidated, that's falling apart. And through no fault of anybody else except the prior owner, who probably just got too old to keep the property, right? And that's understandable. So somebody has to clean it up. Somebody has to, update the appliances. Somebody has to remove the old carpeting. Somebody has to take down the wallpaper. Somebody has to update the electricity, the panels, and make it livable. Okay. And unfortunately that costs, right? So it's not that your landlord is mean and nasty. These are costs that have to be incurred, and they're always passed through to the tenant, and usually in the form of whatever the market rate rent is. Now, for those of you who have landlords that increase the rent just because, I don't speak for them. I don't do that. I always give notice, official certified return receipt letter to my tenants that I inherit, and I let them know the carrying costs are very different now. And let's work together, right? And in a lot of cases where my tenants that I inherit can't afford the rent, I usually provide them with some kind of rent relief program link. And I help accommodate any letters or information they need so they can get accommodation or some kind of rent relief. So I'm always looking for a way to ease the tenant into what is now a new agreement, right? Because it is a new agreement. So just to give you guys some background on, who I am and what I do. So let's talk about the blueprint for a renter's bill of rights. So as part of Wednesday's announcement, the Federal Housing Finance Agency and federal mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say they will look into possibly establishing tenant protections that limit egregious rent increases, right, at properties backed by certain federal mortgages. There's a little bit of conflict because, again, you're financing these properties, right? These properties have a carrying cost. And so, again, in my case, where you're inheriting tenants, a lot of the times those tenants have been there for, 30 years, 20 years, and the rent has never been increased. So it's natural that the rent increase is going to be egregious by percentage standards, right? I had a tenant that was in property. They were the previous owner's two sisters and mother. They've been there 37 years. They were from another country. The market rate for the unit was like $2,500. They were paying $1,100 because their brother, the owner, had no mortgage, right? But here I come, and I'm the new owner and I have carrying costs and the rent is well below market rate. So these are things that landlords have to deal with. And to people saying, well, it's not my fault that you can't afford your property. The fact is, as a renter, you can't afford to purchase property, right? So we both have to kind of come together and understand each other's side, right? Because we can go back and forth and we can argue about this, or we can understand how the system works, right? Somebody walks away with cash, somebody walks in with carrying costs. That's just how it goes, whether it's your mom and pop landlords, which are only 50% of landlords, or it's your larger corporations that have no feelings and will put you out, right? They have the resources, they have the lawyers on deck, maybe even judges that will put you out sooner than later, right? Whereas a smaller landlord may not have the resources, okay? And a smaller landlord may not go after you for back rent because they don't have the resource. They're just so happy to get the unit back and to turn it over. This is what happens. And again, I talk about lease protection insurance so that you can get a good pool of tenants. All my tenants get a renovated unit, fully renovated. I pay for the cost of that unit, and the cost goes down into your rent, which in the form of market rate. So just to bridge the gap for you guys, most Americans are paying over 30% in their rent. Where do I see this going? I see landlords combating this. And I'm thinking as a landlord with renting rooms instead of whole houses. This way you can kind of leverage, your income potential. Because if you have a whole family living in a house and somebody doesn't pay rent, the rent doesn't get paid. But if you rent rooms, you're likely with separate leases to get your rent from somebody, right? And this way you only have to take one person to court, and you can get lease protection for room rentals as well. So just to give you guys some background and just open up the conversation, feel free to drop your comments below. Tell me what you think. I don't know how enforceable this will be. And I'm trying to find the text to read actually how enforceable it will be. It will not undermine state and local authorities. It's just guidelines, right? That's the words being used, blueprint. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of times landlords, they get the brunt of the deal because a lot of states are tenant friendly, which is why it's important to be preventative. Again, have your reserves, have your lease protection insurance, have a lawyer on retainer. If you can't afford these things, guys, just don't get into it. Don't get into it. You have to have reserves, right? Just coming in on the minimal is going to put you in a bind. And that's going to cause a lot of undue emotional stress. People behave more volatile under emotional stress. Think of the renter who now has, to come out of pocket another $500, $600, $700, $800. They've been there forever. I was in eviction court once with my tenant, and I saw an older lady who had been in the property forever, and the owner was very sweet. He said, I don't want to throw her out. I just can't afford to keep the property. And in order for me to sell, it has to be vacant. The sellers want the property vacant. And they both looked distressed. Okay. That's just what it is. Right. So drop your comments below. You want to join the Tax Strategies Mastermind? I'll drop the link in the description. It is a deductible course. We talk about resources for landlords. We talk about a lot of parallel things to tax, because in order to get tax relief, you have to engage in these front end transactions like becoming a landlord and a business owner, right? So, I hope everybody understands the other side of the coin. When you're a landlord, try to understand where the tenant's coming from. They're a casualty in the transaction, right? They have no power. And tenants try to understand the landlord. They have carrying costs. You're likely paying, much less because you've had such a relationship with the old landlord. So feel free to drop the comments below. Tell me what you think. And let's try to understand instead of attack. Okay. Bye.